Hey, beautiful souls, and welcome to Around the Kitchen Table, a space for honest conversations, stories from the heart, and gentle reminders that we're all walking each other home. I'm Laura Island, mother, creative, soul-led CEO of Sacred Sister CIC, and the woman behind Wise Sacred Woman. I'm a witch with ADHD, and this podcast is where we gather to share the real, raw, and radiant parts of life. Each week, we'll explore what it means to live in rhythm with ourselves, with nature, and with one another. We'll talk about womanhood, sisterhood, creativity, leadership, spirituality, and the messy magic of being a human. So pour yourself a cuppa, get comfy, and let's meet here around the kitchen table, where stories are medicine and every voice belongs. Welcome to Around the Kitchen Table. My name's Laura. For those of you who've not met me before, I am the founder of Sacred Sister, and I am here today to talk to you about Friday the 13th and the reclamation of what it is to really come back into our own as a woman, in our own sacred innate power and wisdom. So I'm going to record this fairly swiftly today because I'm laughing at the moment. Actually, it's Friday the 13th at 13:13. I mean, it's all the 13s. And I have to go and pick up my daughter, but it's one of those days where things have just been like one thing after another, after another, after another, and actually really powerfully so. So I didn't want to leave without doing that because you know how it is. I'm going to get out, I'm going to go and pick her up. Then I'm probably going to have to go and like do a bit of a food shop, and then she's going to want to do stuff. And before I know it, it'll be 8 o'clock tonight. And that's the joys, right, of working in and around everything that we do. So first of all, let's talk about Friday the 13th. You know, for many people, it's still a bit of a superstition, a joke, a day associated with bad luck. But what most people don't realize is that Friday the 13th was never meant to be feared. It was feared for us. Because when you begin to look a little deeper into the origins of this date, something fascinating begins to appear. The number 13, the day Friday, the cycles of the moon, they all point to something ancient, something feminine, and something powerful. I did a recording on the February Friday the 13th, and it had over 175,000 views, and many women kind of really recognizing the power of this day and that actually it's only ever been beautiful for them. You know, there are 13 lunar cycles in a year, 13 times the moon waxes and wanes. And for thousands of years, you know, women lived in true alignment with this rhythm. The 13 moons, the 13 cycles, the 13 times the body returns to itself. And for ancient cultures living closely with the earth, 13 represented wholeness, it represented rhythm, it represented the deep intelligence of nature. It mirrored the feminine body. Women bled with the moon. They gathered together in those moments. They rested, they listened, they shared stories and dreams. The cycles of the body were not something to hide, they were seen as sacred. And then let's not forget Friday, right? The day of the goddess. Friday's named after the Norse goddess Freyja. Freyja was the goddess of love and fertility and magic and sovereignty. And then in Roman traditions, Friday was connected to Venus, the goddess of beauty, creativity, and sensuality. So when you bring those two things together, Friday and the number 13, when you get this date that was once deeply connected to the feminine, a day aligned with the moon, with the body, with the goddess, with the cycles of life, this is what happens. History shows us that when patriarchal systems began to dominate society, something changed. Symbols of the feminine power slowly began to be inverted. Women's cycles became shameful, and the wisdom of the earth became superstition. Goddess traditions became heresy, and the number 13 became dangerous. Even events like the arrest of the Knights Templar on Friday the 13th in 1307 added to the superstition that still surrounds this date today. But underneath all of those stories, that original frequency of this day never actually disappeared because the moon never stopped moving, the earth never stopped turning, and the body never forgot its rhythm. The day that, women were told their bodies were wrong. That's something that, we don't really talk about. It wasn't one single moment in history, but a shift that happened slowly over centuries. It was the moment when women were taught that their bodies could not be trusted. Thousands of years before that shift, women's bodies were understood as part of nature. The way the moon moved, the tides moved, the seasons moved, and women moved with them. Our cycles were not something to hide, they were a source of wisdom. But I grew up at the age of 12 when I started to my first bleed with my mum telling me that, the devil's curse had arrived. Thanks, mum. you know, and that's the reality. That's what became that deep part of me that feared that every month. I've had some beautiful conversations this week around cycles and periods and our bleed and hysterectomies and like a powerful journey with a beautiful sister that we just leaned into sharing our stories this week, and it was like, wow, so much connection, so much reflection on those journeys, different but the same. And it was really beautiful to lean into the power of that. And it reminds me of what it is when we share our stories with each other, not to have a kind of general chat, but to really listen deeply to another's story. That's where our wisdom is. But as systems of control grew stronger and stronger through organized religion and later through industrial culture, something changed. The body became something to manage. Cycles became inconvenient, intuition became unreliable, and slowly a message entered the culture: don't trust your body, don't trust your emotions, don't trust your intuition. Trust the authority outside of you. Of course, why would you not? Trust the system, trust the expert. And that message was repeated for generations upon generations upon generations until many women forgot that their body was ever a source of wisdom at all. And that's what I feel we're moving back towards. Because even when a story is repeated for centuries, it doesn't erase the truth. Because deep underneath the conditioning, the body remembers. We remember. Even when we're not allowed, even when we are shouting our wisdom from the rooftops and still being told we're somehow wrong. I know that place in me that really connects deeply, even without a womb these days, even without that connection to a physical bleed cycle. I know my innate wisdom. I feel my innate wisdom. And actually, somehow it feels even deeper because it's not coming from that place where bleed. I've had to learn how to understand my wisdom differently. So this brings me to something I feel really passionate about speaking to you today. And it's partly because I woke up this morning and I've been sharing rituals online for a long time. And I got really clear about it over Christmas. We did the 13 magical nights, kind of coming up to the end of the year of the snake and the beginning of the fire horse. I mean, how is that for everybody? It's crazy, right? Like, I was doing rituals. I'm about to share some rituals with you for the next 7 days running up to spring equinox. It's something I do. It's who I am. It's innate. And I want to share those wisdom and those rituals with you. But what I'm so passionate about is you beginning to remember these ancient rituals and these ancient rhythms, the moon, the earth, ritual gathering. When you begin to really remember them for yourself, something beautiful starts to happen. But there's also something we need to be a little bit careful about, and that's the temptation to outsource our wisdom again. So we know we want to do ritual, we know we want to lean into the moon. You see it everywhere. Women searching for the right ritual, the right moon practice, the right ceremony to follow. And I totally get it, because when you've been disconnected for so long, Of course, we look outside ourselves for guidance. I do it too. I share rituals, I create spaces, I offer practice for women to explore. But the deeper truth is this, even with a whole multitude of spell books on my shelf, and I can tell you there's many, it doesn't replace my innate inner wisdom. Those things are not meant to do that, they're meant to wake it up because your body already carries the knowing, your intuition already speaks, and your soul already understands what it needs. The real question is not what ritual should I follow? The real question is what is my body asking for right now? Maybe your ritual is lighting a candle. Maybe your ritual is walking barefoot on the earth. Maybe your ritual is singing in the garden. Maybe your ritual is crying. Maybe your ritual is laughing with another woman until your belly hurts. Maybe your ritual is simply sitting quietly long enough to hear your own voice again. Ritual was never meant to be performed, and it wasn't meant to be a performance. It was never meant to be something you had to get right. It is simply coming back into presence, a moment where you pause long enough to remember that we are a part of life. And perhaps this is why we're seeing something happening all over the world right now. Women are returning to ritual, not because it's trendy, not because it's something new, not because it's Instagram worthy, not because you've, dressed in the right clothing, but because something in your body recognizes it. You feel it. You feel it when you light the candle. You feel it when you step outside and look at the moon. You feel it when women gather and something in the room softens. You feel it when you finally slow down long enough to hear your own breath. And the return of ritual is not about copying someone else's practice. It's about remembering your own rhythm again. Because the wisdom was never lost. It's simply waiting to be remembered. So, what does Friday the 13th really mean to you? How can you reclaim something so magical on this day that allows you to listen to your intuition? That's exactly what I've been feeling really called to explore more deeply. The stories that we inherited about who we are as women, the places we were taught to disconnect from our bodies, from our intuition, from each other, and how we begin to find our way home again. And that has brought me to this bubbling of a webinar. I call it a webinar, a masterclass, a ritual, a ritual. I'm going to call it a ritual. It's called Reclamation, and it's all about listening to wounds and finding our way back home. It's a space where we'll explore why so many women feel disconnected from their own inner knowing and how these stories were created. And how we begin reclaiming our wisdom and our voice and our rhythm again, not by becoming someone new, but by remembering who you already are. So today, on this Friday the 13th, instead of fearing it, let it be a moment of remembrance, a reminder that the wisdom of the feminine was never truly lost. It was simply waiting for us to come back to it. And if this conversation speaks to you, I would love you to join me for Reclamation. It's going to happen in the spring equinox. So it's going to happen next week, Saturday, I think. I feel like it's probably Saturday. And I just want to look at the timing so that it kind of reaches as many of you around the world as can be possible. So you'll find the link in the show notes. I'll share them with you here. And as always, thank you for being part of the remembering. Thank you for being present here with me today. It's a very short one because actually I don't feel like sharing loads today. I feel like being in my inner wisdom and I feel like inviting you into yours. So I'd love you to comment here on this video, right? I know that many of you watch lots more are you watching us. Like, I want you to take a moment to do two things for me. Subscribe, follow along, know that I'm gonna keep showing up and you're gonna see what we do. Because over the next 7 days, I will share more about the lead up to spring equinox and what rituals you can consider leaning into. But also, I really want you to comment here about, what does ritual mean to you? Because I want to reclaim that word as well. Ritual, devotion. Like, let's reclaim those words away from perhaps faith and religion and the places where maybe it's been doctored in some way to not feel as sacred as it really is. Because your sacred journey isn't outside of yourself, like I said, it's right inside. And when you stop and you listen and you lean in and you breathe and you hear, you'll know what I mean by intuition. You know those moments where something bubbles up in your belly and you think, whoa, what was that? And then you ignore it. You ride over it. The red flags, the green flags, they're all your intuition. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for connecting with me, however that looks for you today. I really hope that Friday the 13th is a powerful and magical day for you. And share with me, what is your ritual of the day? I'll speak to you soon. Laura out.